My favorite part, seeing everybody.
Welcome,
Um,
everybody. Welcome back to another Michael's Community Classroom. We're so excited to be here on a Monday morning, Monday at noon, depending on where you are. We're here with Marley Bird for another fantastic class. And today we are going to be talking all things crochet mittens. So I know we have a lot to cover in today's class. Just as a reminder, the class will be recorded and will be available for you to come back and watch within 24 to 48 hours. So if you miss anything, please just keep that in mind. And if you have any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat box and we will get to as many as we can.
yeah,
Awesome.
awesome. You ready to go? Hey,
I,
everybody. You ready to make some mittens? I don't know if you heard, mittens seem to be very popular over the last couple of weeks. So I'm thrilled to be joining here today. All of you in the Michael's Community Classroom to teach you how to crochet mittens. The great thing about this particular mitten pattern is it's really quite basic in the way the mittens are created. And you can take the knowledge you will gain today creating these mittens and move it forward to make other mittens, whether you decide to do some color work with them, do some texture, do some striping, whatever it happens to be. This is a really good basis. As Ali mentioned, I do want to make sure that you know you can ask a question, not a question, you can ask questions throughout the entire class. Just make sure you write them in the chat. Ali is going to be moderating those for me, and she will jump in and interrupt me if there is a question. She's like, ooh, this is a good one. She can get to it. Mostly though, we have 1 hour for me to try and get through as much of this mitten as possible. So knowing this is going to be recorded, you can go back and rewatch it. I do want to remind you of that. So if you happen to miss something, you will be able to go back and rewatch it. Also, I have a full video to make these mittens on the Marley Bird YouTube channel as well. So there's lots of different ways for you to get everything you need to make these mittens. So if you guys are ready to go, I'm going to jump on in. Allie, did you add the link to the pattern in the chat by chance?
I will be dropping that in for everybody in just one moment.
All right, cool. So while she's doing that, I'm going to have all you guys at least say hello, find that chat and say hello and let us know where you're joining us from. There's quite a few of you here. I am in Fishers, Indiana, where it is so cold today. So I'm in my warm and toasty little office and I'm excited to start crocheting. I will be using some different colored yarns today to try and show you the different aspects of the mitten. Obviously on your mittens, you can use one color yarn. I'm also going to be using a larger hook than what the pattern calls for, just because the colors I think show up really well with this particular hook. And so I wanted to use this one. I think it looks good. So I'm using a size H or a 5mm hook today. The pattern calls for a 4.5mm hook. Honestly, you want to use a hook size that you actually get gauge for, meaning you want to make sure these mittens actually fit somebody, right? You don't want them to be too small, you don't want them to be too big. So make sure that as you are going along, you measure your stitches, that way you can make sure that you are getting gauge. Okay. I will let you guys know that a little bit bigger is better than a little bit smaller, because if they're too small, especially with crochet, they stretch and then you really get those holes and then you get the wind and the snow and the blah blah blah. So it's almost better to have them a little bit bigger versus a little bit smaller. Just my little tip to all of you. Okay, so I'm assuming that all of you know at least the basics of crochet. You're adventurous beginners. So we're going to jump in and we're going to get cruising and we're going to start with the cuff of the mitten. So let's go ahead and drop down to my hands. All right, here we go. So I have the mittens that we are making right here, and they come in 3 different sizes. And you can see it's just, I mean, you just make a little bit more stitches to make each size a little bit bigger, which is great. The cuff down here is worked up using single crochets. So we will single crochet working in the back loop only to create these really great cuffs. It looks sort of like ribbing, and it's really easy to do. So this is where we're going to start. From there, we will turn the cuff on its side once we seam it up, and we will put a series of single crochet into the side of the cuff and then begin to work our mitten from there using half double crochets. All right, so that is our game plan. I'm going to start off with some worsted weight yarn. The pattern calls for Caron 1 pound. I'm just using a basic worsted weight yarn here to start off. I have a slip knot directly onto my hook. And I am going to follow the instructions for the smallest size. So I will chain 10. Just so you are aware, when Yarnspirations does their pattern, all the sizes come in different colors. So if you're doing one of the other sizes, you can always follow along the color as well. What we want to do here at the beginning is single crochet into the second loop from hook, and then we will single crochet in each chain all the way to the end. Now on this particular part, it doesn't matter if you go through the front loop or the back loop or the underneath part. It really doesn't matter at all. We just want to get through these chains and get things going. As long as we have a loop exposed that we can seam up later on, that's the important part. So I'm just single crocheting all the way down this. And by the time I'm to the end, I will have 9 single crochets. Now, here's a little tidbit. If you want to make your cuff longer, say you're like me and you like longer cuffs that can tuck into your sleeve, all you need to do is just chain more than the designated number for the size you're making and just work single crochets all the way down. You can make this as long as you want. But as far as the circumference of it, you want to keep that the same thing that's written in the pattern. You can turn your work at this point and we would chain 1. And then we're going to work in the back loop only. Do you guys know what the back loop only is? If you're looking at the top of your crochet, this right here is the front loop. This right here is the back loop. So as the top of the stitches look like V's, we're going to do the one that's back here. Okay. So I'm going to go into the back loop only and single crochet. Go to the back loop only and single crochet. Back loop only and single crochet. And we continue this all the way down. Now I'm going to give you a tip here. One of the things that a lot of crocheters, whether they're experienced or new crocheters, tend to do is they will forget that last stitch when they're doing something like this, because it just is a little bit hard to see. So it makes it so much easier if you use a stitch marker in the stitch. So that way, as you're coming down the row, you know exactly which one is the very last stitch, okay? So we could take a second right here and we could count. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 stitches. So that's great. I'm not shorting myself a stitch by any means. All I would do here is I can turn, chain 1, and I'm going to do the same thing once again. I will single crochet in the back loop only. But this time, just to make sure that I know that that is the top of that first stitch I just created, okay, I'm going to take my stitch marker and I will place it into the top of that stitch. So if you're looking at your hook, you see that V behind the hook? I want you to mark it. That's going to let you know that that's the last stitch on the next row you come to. Now we just continue on down this row. And this is all you do for the entire cuff, you guys. You just work single crochets in the back loop only. And that's what's going to create this really great ribbing look. Now, as I mentioned, like I have videos for how to do single crochet ribbing just like this. I have videos for how to do mittens. I mean, so many different ones. So if you need extra help, there are tools out there for you. Right here on Michael's, rewatch this class. You could watch my videos on YouTube. There are so many options for you. But what we're doing right now, you guys, this is a great skill to learn because it's not only, oh, so I just finished, I'm sorry, I'm going to undo this. I'll go back to my great skill to learn topic here in just a second. So I've reached the end of my row. I turn, chain 1, single crochet in the back loop only. And then once again, I'm going to use another marker and put it into that loop right behind the loop on my hook. Okay, that's right after I do my single, I put it right there. Okay. So this is a great skill to learn because this particular sort of ribbing, this single crochet through the back loop only, is used a lot on cuffs. It's used on bags. It's used on sweaters. It's used on so many different things, on socks. So learning this skill is one that you definitely want to add to your crocheter's toolbox. When you get to the end of the row here, you'll see that I have that last stitch marked. So I know that that is the last stitch of my row, and I don't even have to go back and start counting once again. Okay, the chain one is not counted. You do not count that chain one. All right, so as you turn and chain one, that chain one does not count as a stitch. And that is why we are putting that single crochet in that very first stitch. So I'm going to remove this marker because I'm going to move it up. So I've turned, I've chained one, I go into I go in that first stitch. See, there's my chain, there's the first stitch, back loop only, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through two, take my marker again, and I'm going to put it into that stitch. So now I know that's the last stitch of my row. And then I carry on, still working in the back loop only. You spend a lot of time just working into these back loops only. I'm going to do this just for a couple more minutes because I know that some of you, I know I'm further than some of you out there, but I'm doing the exact same thing you're doing once you hit row 2. So by just repeating this on my end, you're able to see everything you're supposed to do for this ribbing. Here's a little tip as well. As you're working these rib stitches, we become very comfortable with working these single crochets. So we tend to make the stitches a little bit tighter as you go along. You want to make sure that as you create these stitches, you are making sure these loops are coming up here to this part of your hook. So that way you are getting the correct size of your stitch each time, okay? If you keep your loop down, I got to move up my marker. If you keep the loop you pull up down here on this part of the hook, it's going to be too small. Also, after you finish the stitch, if you pull it, it's going to be too small. So make sure that it is nice and controlled right here. Nope, I did the chain one. It's out there. All right, so I'm just going to continue on. These stitches, guys, just remember, we're just doing single crochets, but we're working through the back loop only. All right, there's lots of different areas where you can create stitches. So we are making sure that we are working through the back loop only of these stitches. Turn my work, chain one, back loop only. Move my marker up. How we doing, Allie?
I think we're doing all right.
You think we're doing all right? You think we're ready to go on to the next part? So what you do here is you just continue doing this until this measures the distance written in the pattern for the size you're making. So it's either 4.5 inches long, 5 inches long, or 7 inches long. By working in the back loop only, you guys, you get this ridge look. You see that? It looks like ribbing. If you didn't work through the back loop only, you'd get a really smooth type of look, right? But working through the back loop only and working back and forth, you get a ribbed look. Can you see that? You guys see that? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna assume you guys are good with this. And if you're not good with this, just know you can always come back and watch this. You will just be working this, like I said, until this measures 4.5 inches, 5 inches, or 7 inches. Once you've reached that measurement, I'm gonna remove these markers because I'm gonna have to use them here in a minute. Once you've reached that measurement, your work looks a little something like this, okay? So I have this nice cuff right here. You can see it has a lot of stretch. There's a lot of give, which is why you want to make sure you don't make this too long because, and you'll notice the pattern doesn't say that it's 4.5 inches slightly stretched. It just says 4.5 inches. So that way when it stretches, I mean, look at how much stretch that has. So if you made it much longer, you could have a really big cuff and then a small mitten. So you want to make sure you account for that stretch. I also want to designate to make sure we know which is the right side. So when we started, we had our slip stitch on our hook right here. We chained down and then we did a single crochet in the second chain from hook and in each one down. When we did that, this particular side of our work was the right side. So I put a marker on this right side. So if you're right-handed, your tail, if it's on the left side of your work, this is the right side of your fabric. Okay, will that help you guys? When you reach your distance for your cuff, you want to make sure you end after the wrong side. See, I ended after the wrong side and I turned. So I'm looking at the right side of my fabric. Our goal now is to take this end of our fabric that we did our foundation, our single crochets into our chains. And we're going to slip stitch those loops that we left. Can you see those loops there? If I can kind of get into it. Those loops that are the other side of the chains that we didn't use. We're going to join those with a slip stitch up here to this row that we're on through the back loop only. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to fold this up and I'm going to have this working behind me. Now, this is the way this pattern is written. I like to actually do patterns where it's this way, but it really doesn't really matter. We just want this to be joined is what we want here, okay? So we're bringing this up and we're going to go through both parts of this fabric. We're going to go through this side and this side. When we're working on the row we're on, we will once again be going through the back loop only. When we're working on this side to join, you want to work through that loop that's free. So you got to find the free loop. Find that free loop. There it is. See, like there. And then, oops, I was trying to show you. So I have one there, one there, one there, one there. You see what I mean? So I should have 9 free loops all the way down, okay? And we're doing these as slip stitches. So you do not start this row with a chain 1. So this row, you do not start with a chain 1. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up my work, put my hook in here. All right, here we go. I'm going to go into this back leg of this first stitch, and I'm going to go into the corresponding chain on the other side of my cuff. When I do that, yarn over, pull through both of those, and then pull through the loop on your hook. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to go to the next back loop only, and I go to the next loop that's exposed on the other side, yarn over. I'll pull that yarn over through both of those loops I just went through and the loop that's on my hook. Back loop only, corresponding loop, yarn over, draw through all of it. And we're doing slip stitches. And this is a really great way to join not only a cuff, you guys, but doing this sort of slip stitch join. This is a great way to join blankets like Afghan squares, or if you're going to seam a sweater, maybe you want some sort of a nice seam at the shoulder to hold the weight of the sweater. There are a lot of benefits to doing a slip stitch seam like this, okay? So I want to make sure that you're using this knowledge that you can use it for other things. Once that slip stitch seam is done, you can see it's right there, but it looks virtually invisible. Isn't that cool? Everybody with me on that? How are we doing, Allie?
We're doing good.
Okay. All right. So I want everybody to make sure they can see that. This is still the right side of my fabric because I have my marker here. I use markers all the time, you guys. I think they're great. You can see we have this nice stretch, and this is just a beautiful, virtually invisible seam. Okay, so I don't need this marker here anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it because I will be able to use it here in another way. So the pattern says, I want to make sure I'm reading this so that we're all on the same place. It says, do not turn turn the work and proceed as follows. Do not fasten off, turn the work and proceed as follows. So we're going to chain 2 at the beginning of the round, and this does not count as a half double crochet. And we're going to work a series of single crochets. No, hold on. No, okay, sorry. It says note, chain 2 at the beginning of these rounds do not count as a half double crochet. So now we're on page 2. So it says beginning to work in rounds. So this is where we're going to start to build the fabric from the cuff. Okay, we're going to build the fabric from the cuff. We will start off, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work a number of single crochets evenly around this cuff as much as you can for the size you're doing, and then we'll join with the slip stitch at the end to create in the round. So because we weren't told exactly how many rows to do for our cuff, right? We were given a measurement. One person might have 18 ridges, another person might have 20 ridges. Okay, so we're not going to go by the idea of, oh, put one at the end of each ridge. Okay, there are patterns that are written that way, not this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my marker, and I'm going to mark the halfway point, essentially. All right, so this for the smallest size, I did 4.5 because I'm doing the smallest size, trying to get through all of this with you guys. So I'm going to mark the halfway point. So I know if I have to do 18 stitches all the way around, now I know I only have to get 9 up to that halfway point and 9 back to the starting point. Okay. If I wanted to divide it even more, say you were one of the people that were doing all the large sizes, you could divide each of the halves by half. So maybe you do something like this. All right. And then what you would do is you put a quarter here, a quarter here, quarter here, and a quarter here. This is not only helpful with a mitten like this, you guys, this is a great way to divide up if you're doing buttonholes on something, if you're doing an edging on a blanket, if you're doing anything that you have to do something in certain increments. Divide up your sections and make them smaller, manageable numbers instead of one large, like, let's say it was 28, because you could get to right here and have your 28 and you're like, oh man, and you have to rip out and start again. Make this manageable. Okay, so take this skill beyond your crochet mitten here. You can use this for so many other things. So for me, I've divided this up. I'm going to do 9 single crochets up to this marker. Okay, so I know I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 ridges. So if I put 1 in each ridge, then I know that I have to do 2 more single crochets at some point in between. And I'll just kind of divvy them up just to make them as even as possible. Okay, so this is not one of those things that people are gonna be like, oh, yours are too close together. Nobody is going to be looking at your mittens that close. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you that right now. I'm going to pause here because I'm going to change colors so that way you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to cut the Mai Tai color, and I'm going to bring in what I call mimosa. And on this last one, I'm just going to chain one with mimosa, just so that way we have a different color so you can hopefully easily see what I'm doing. That's my hope here. All right, so it has us start off with the chain 1, and then we're going to start single crocheting. Remember, I'm going to get 9. So I'm going to put one at the top of each one of my ridges. So I'm just going to decide on my own what looks best. If I just go through like one little loop, does that work? Should I go through something more substantial, like more through the body of it? You have to make that decision for yourself. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong. Just pick what works best for your piece and go with it. All right. I think I tend to like that, just that random loop out there. I think it's not random loop. It's probably the chain 1. And I'll yarn over and pull through. So that's 1. And then I'm going to stick one of my first extra 2 that I have to do, right? That's outside of the ridges. And I'm going to put it there. And I'm going to come over here and let's grab, let's see that one. Here's a little tip. Use the hook on your hook, the little, the actual hook on your hook to your advantage. If you can't get into a loop, look at this. I turn it upside down and I like grab at it and stick my hook in, and it helps me get through it pretty easily. So there's that. And then I'm going to come over here to this. And remember, I am using a larger hook because I wanted you guys to be able to see the stitches as compared to my hook. So this would be, I'm going to put my second one as far as my one that I decided I was going to put outside of my ridge right there. I'm just going to get around here. You can see I use my hook a lot to kind of snag at things. It's very helpful. Now I will pause here and I'm going to count to make sure I have 9. And I'm going to show you guys another little tip as far as using these markers. Okay. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 stitches here, which is great. Here's what I want to do. This marker, I am going to place it in the top of that 9th stitch. The reason I do that right now is when I'm doing the next 9 stitches, if I need to rip back for some reason, I want to know at what point that I did have 9 previously. Like I want to make sure I have my stopping point. So I can put it into the back of the stitch like we've been doing all along. I can put it into the front of the stitch. Whatever works for you, just mark it so that way you know where it is. And now I'm going to carry on and do my next 9. So let's do 1, 2, and 3. Oops, I'm gonna go. What you'll see here, like just try and be consistent with whatever you're doing. 4, 5, 6. Let's do 7, 8. And here's another little tip. If you get to the end and you're like, ooh, I feel like I'm a little bit too far, maybe I want to close that up a little bit, you could always go into like 2 of them. You could go in like sort of like a single crochet 2 together if you wanted to. Like I could go into here and pull up a loop, and then maybe this was something I wanted to close more. I could go in there and pull up a loop and then do like a 2 together just to close up any hole, and then join with the slip stitch. Okay, you don't have to do that single crochet 2 together. That's purely just, it's one of those little things just to show you how you could tweak yours a little bit. Okay, let me get my yarn all down here. When you reach the end of your round, we're going to join with a slip stitch. So we're no longer working through the back loop only. We're going to go through both of those. So I'm going to go through both of those as the first single crochet I did. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull through 2. All right, everybody with me here? So at this point, I have 18 stitches because I'm doing the child size, like the size 2 or something like that. I can remove this marker because I no longer need it, and I'm ready to carry on. All right, Allie, are there any questions at this point?
There's a question here. Could you do single crochets on each ridge and also in between?
You absolutely could. If that's what you need to do, you absolutely could. You could do it however you want to make sure you get the right number of stitches. And you'll notice like I still have some stretch down here, but up here it's a little bit more tight because those single crochets are a little bit more snug than the ribbing. So you do want to just make sure that everything is the right size and where you need it to be. Like make sure you didn't make these single crochets too tight and they're coming in like this. Okay. Yes, I can do that slip stitch join once again if you want. So here at the end, when you get to the end of your round, go underneath both legs of that first single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then draw through the loop on your hook. Okay, that's a slip stitch. All right, guys, so that's the beginning of the round. So now we're going to jump in. So we jump in, it starts off with the chain 2. And we already read that it said this chain 2 does not count as a stitch. So we are not going to count that, which means when the instructions tell us to do a half double crochet in each stitch around, we will put our first half double right there into the same stitch we joined with that slip stitch. All right. So the half double, become very familiar with these. You guys ready? You're going to yarn over your hook. Go into this first stitch, and we're going to go under both loops. We are not going to just go through the back. Under both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop. So you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, draw through all 3 loops on your hook. Okay? Yarn over your hook, go underneath both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 3 loops on your hook. We're going to do this all the way around, okay? And as I'm working around, you'll see in the instructions that you will repeat this round 1 time for the 2 smaller sizes, and then 2 times for the larger size. I will also let you know that this is one of those areas that if you needed to customize your mitten a little bit, this is a good area to do it. Because the longer you make this area before we jump into the gusset, it gives you more space. It gives you more space before your hand, it makes this space longer before it goes into your thumb gusset. So if you wanted that to be a little bit longer and customize your mitten a little bit, you could add more. Oh, I just said a single. You could add more rounds of these half double crochets than is written in the pattern. Totally up to you. It's a great way just for a little bit of customization. If you want it a little bit longer, like I hate it when I have mittens that I put on and like the cuff reaches like right here. Like I want my cuff down here. So I always like to have extra just plain fabric right here before I jump into my thumb gusset. Anybody else out there like that? Like I hate when my cuff reaches up on my palm. Drives me insane. Perfect. I can see that I am not the only one out there. I'm also one of those people that I like an extra long cuff, so I always make my cuffs longer so that way I can put it underneath my sleeve. All right, so I'm gonna have to count because I didn't count. When you get to the end of the round, you're gonna join once again with a slip stitch. So we're gonna find the top of this first half double crochet we did, and it's right there. You can find the V right at the top of it. And we're going to join with the slip stitch once again. We go in, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through. All right. You with me? Okay. So that's 1 round. It says we're supposed to repeat round 2 1 more time for the size I'm doing. So I'm going to do it again. We're going to chain 2. Remember that does not count as a stitch. Yarn over, go into the first half double crochet. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 3. Here's a question, or here's a tip. If you wanted to use your markers again, guys, this is where you'd want to do it. You'd put it into that V behind the loop on your hook. Can you guys all see that? The V behind the loop on your hook. And that will help you find where you're supposed to join with the slip stitch if you need to. Now I'm just going to continue on working these half double crochets around, and I'm going to count because I have a feeling I did 1 too many this last round. So that's 2. What was that? Did you guys hear that? All right, so here is 18. I did it right now. I have no idea what that was. It wasn't from mine, so I don't know what it was. Okay, so here is the top of my very first stitch that I'll join with the slip stitch. I have 18 half double crochets. You see how convenient it is to have it marked so I don't have to go searching for it. So all I do is just go into it, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that through. And then I remove it and I can just move it up. But from this point forward, we are ready to do the thumb gusset. And I'm going to give you guys tips that are not written in the pattern. So follow along with me here. You ready? We are going to use our markers to our advantage because it makes things so much easier. And here we go. Okay. I'm going to jump in. So the thumb gusset, if you don't know what the thumb gusset is, it's this portion of the mitten that makes the mitten large enough to expand out from this part. So imagine you're making the mitten to measure right here, right? But your hand doesn't just go straight up from there, right? Unless you don't have a thumb. But you have this thumb. So you have this extra area out here that we need to cover with fabric. So we're going to create some extra fabric out here by creating larger or making this area out here larger for our stitches. So we start off with the chain 2. Does that count as a stitch? The crowd says no. Good job. So we do not count that as a stitch. Now it says I'm going to do 1 half double crochet in each of the next 8, 10, or 13. I love it. Everybody says no. All right, so I'm going to do 8 because that's what I have to do. So I'm going to go into this first one. So there's 1. I take my marker. We're going to have lots of markers, guys. You ready? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, this is where we're going to start to place our thumb gusset. So in this next stitch, we're going to do 2 half double crochets. So I'm going to yarn over my hook, go into the next stitch, and work 1 half double crochet. And then I'm going to yarn over my hook, go into the same stitch, and do a second half double crochet. Now, this is not written in the pattern. This is my tip to you. You guys ready? Take a marker and put it in the top of the very first half double you did of that set. Okay? Take a marker and put it right there. This marker represents the first stitch of your gusset, and this particular stitch is where you're going to be building the double stitches each time you're working the gusset. Okay, so that's 1. Now we have to do that again in the next one. All right, because it says 2 half double crochets in the next 2. So there's 1, 2. So we're going to do that again over here. So we're going to do 1 and 2 into the same stitch. This time, I want you to take a marker and I want to put it in the top of the second one you did of that set. So the one that's right behind the loop on your hook. Take a marker and mark it. All right. Now go ahead and just work half double crochets all the way to the end of the round. And you're going to see where these markers help on the next round. So you don't, I mean, just half double crochet around. When you get to the end, make sure you, oh, I put my marker in the wrong place because I wasn't paying attention. Make sure you're into the top of that half double crochet, join with a slip stitch, and you're done. So we have already started increasing for our gusset over here. Where we did have 2 stitches, now we have 4, right? So we have a mark stitch, 1, 2, and a mark stitch. All right, now let's read the instructions for the next one. All right, we're going to see how these markers help. So it says to chain 2 and then half double crochet in each of the next 8 or 10 or 13, depending on which size you're doing. So we're going to do that. I could also say, go ahead and half double crochet over to that marker. All right, everybody with me on that? So the instructions told us exactly how many to half double crochet. I just said half double crochet over to that marker. Now, where this marker is, I want you to put 2 half double crochet into that same stitch where the marker is. It's the same thing that the instructions are telling us. It says do 2 half double crochets in the next half double. So we're going to do that. So we're going to do the first one. Go ahead and take that marker and move it up. Okay, you could do the first one, move that marker up into that one, and then do another one into that same stitch. All right, you guys see that? Now the instructions say 1 half double crochet in the next 2 half doubles. Well, I want you to think of it this way. Now I want you to half double over to the next marker. Okay, so yarn over, half double into the next 2 or over to the next marker. Now in the next marker, I want you to do 2 more half doubles. So do the first one and then do the second one. And remember, we want to mark that second one. You guys see how these markers are helping you? So you don't have to count. They're telling you where to go and you don't have to count. So at the end of the day, when you're making these you're making these mittens after a long day at work, You don't have to spend your time sitting here counting stitches. The markers are going to be your friend. And then we just half double crochet all the way to the end. We have one more round of increases we've got to do for the gusset, for the two smaller sizes. For the larger size, you would have another round of increases because you have, you know, a larger hand to account for. All right. You can already see if you put your work together where you kind of match up those markers, you can see where it's starting to poke out just a little bit right there. All right. We need that bigger, obviously, because we have a bigger hand to work into. So we're going to do one more. So let's go through this. I'm going to talk through it just like I would do if I was not looking at the pattern. I was be like, all right, I just got to half double crochet over to my marker. And I know I'm half double crocheting quickly, guys, but I'm hoping you know how to do a half double crochet by this point and don't need me to go slow on each one. All right, so I've half double crocheted over to my marker. I know in this mark stitch, I've got to increase. So I'm going to put 2 half doubles. So in the first one, and then I move my marker up because on this side of my gusset, it's always that first one that I need to have marked. And then I'll do the second one into that same stitch. Now I'm going to half double crochet over to my next marker. To the next marker. It's 1. There's 2. And then remember, I want to mark my second one on this side of the gusset. And then I'm just going to half double crochet all the way home. This little piggy went to the market. This little, I'm sorry. That's what it sounded like there for a second. These are the jokes, people. All right, so I'm going to get to the end and then I will join with a slip stitch. Oops. Should I go through the actual stitch? Join with a slip stitch. So let's take a look at what we have. So I set this down. Obviously, this is not an adult size. This is a child size. But you can see right there, this little tiny thumb gusset is poking out there. Okay. So that was the third round. For the adult size, you would have another round to increase some stitches here. Okay. Then once you've done that, for all sizes, we've come back to this. And what we're going to be doing essentially, you guys, this time, we're going to work around to the marker, but then we're going to put 1 stitch in that marker. All right. We're going to ignore all of the stitches to the next marker, and then we're going to put 1 stitch in this marker. Here's the caveat though. This particular pattern is written to where they put 2 chains between these two. So you'll do a stitch there, chain 2, skip all of those, and then do a stitch here. There are some patterns where you don't need that chain 2, but we're going to put one in because that's the way the pattern is written. But all of this out here is just going to hang out there and wait for us to come back and do a thumb with later on. Okay. So they're just going to hang out there. So the pattern itself is written. I mean, think about it. It says half double crochet over to the half double crochet 9. So it's 1 more than what we have been doing, which is, what is our 1 more? Oh, it's the marked stitch. See how convenient it is to have those markers? You don't really have to overthink this. I mean, if you think of this really as a recipe for making mittens, it just makes so much sense. Okay. And I just want to note real quick, I'm not doing any special tricks to make this line up to go straight. You absolutely can, but this isn't the class for that. But if you want to learn how to make these lines not go diagonal and go straight, there are tricks you can do for that, but this is perfectly normal. So if this is the first time you've ever done this, then this is normal. If you're like, why do I have this curve? That's totally normal. Okay. All right, here we go. So we start off with our chain 2, and I'm going to half double crochet over to my marker, and then I'm going to put 1 stitch in my marker because we're no longer increasing. We're going to get back to where we're just on our hand stitches. Stitch markers are awesome, you guys. They're great. And if you use these I love these ones here. I think they're fantastic. I also make my own stitch markers. I think they're fun. All right, so we're right here. I'm going to put 1 stitch in my marked stitch. Then the instructions tell us to chain 2. Place a marker on the second chain. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this marker. I'm going to place a marker onto that second chain. All right, so I placed a marker onto that second chain. Then it says skip 6. Skip 6 or 8, depending on how many you have. Or essentially, guys, jump over here to where this other marker is and do a half double over there. See it? Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and remove that marker because we don't need it anymore. It served its purpose. Now we go ahead and half double crochet all the way around to the end. I have a friend, speaking of stitch markers, she loves to use bobby pins. Selena Baca, she's a wonderful crochet designer. She loves to use bobby pins for her stitch markers. She thinks they're awesome. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end, join with a slip stitch to the top of the first half double. And you can see here, I'm back to working in the round. Okay, I'm back to working in the round. I still have the same stitch count that I started with. However, I have 2 extra chains here. So on this next round, as I'm coming up to where these chains are, I'm going to end up putting half double crochets in each of these 2 chains. Okay, so I'm going to put half double crochets in those chains. But you see that over there, that's going to be where our thumb is. All right, I've got to get through this next round so that way I can jump to the thumb. Because I think once you've gotten this far, you could do the top of the mitten because it's, I mean, it's just like a hat. It's like just about anything else. But let's get through this. So we're going to chain 2 and I half double crochet in the next 9. So it's essentially I'm half double crocheting over to where my chains are, right? You guys like how I try and put it down in layman's terms? This is how I talk to myself when I read through patterns. I'm like, all right, so you're telling me this, but this is really what you mean. All right, so there are my 9. And then right here, it says that I'm going to do 1 half double crochet in each of the next 2 chains. So I've got these 2 chains here that we did. So I'm just going to put a half double crochet into each one. So just like when you were working into the chains at the start, just work half doubles. So I'm just doing that. I'm going to keep my marker in place because the pattern did not tell me to remove it. So I'm just doing 2 half doubles. And then I carry on with half double crochets all the way around. And because I've just added 2 half doubles into those chains, I have now increased my stitch count by 2. So below my thumb gusset, I had 18, but now above my thumb gusset, I will have 20. All right, and that's for the smaller size. You guys see that? All right, I'm going to come back here and I join the slip stitch. I'm going to set this down. And look at that. Look how cute this little mitten is. It's a little tiny mitten. Little hands. Okay, so the instructions say the next round you would chain 2 and then half double crochet all the way around. And you would do that until this portion of the mitten, let me bring this one in. You would do that until this portion of the mitten measures 3.5 inches, 4.5 inches, or 6 inches. All right, that's what that is. Here's another tip. If you are making your mittens for somebody, maybe they have longer fingers. After you get through the thumb gusset and before you start shaping the top of the mitten, this section here, you could add extra length or decrease length. So if you want this section here to be longer or shorter from where we just finished right here up to before you do the shaping of the top, you can add rows or rounds or decrease rounds if you need this to make it shorter or longer, okay? So that's where your customization would come in. Once you reach that, the instructions indicate you're supposed to do half double crochet 2 togethers. Just because I'm not sure you know how to do them, I'm going to just show you how to do half double crochet 2 together, and then I've got to jump to this so that you know how to do the thumb. All right? So I'm just going to start off as if it were starting off. It would be half double crochet in the first. This would be if I was starting the shape the top, okay? I'm just jumping there just to show you. So it would half double crochet in each of the next 3. So that's 1, 2, and 3, and that's for the size I'm working. Then it says half double crochet 2 together. So here's how you would do that. Yarn over your hook, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over your hook, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. So you have 5 loops on your hook, yarn over, draw through all 5. Okay, I'm going to show you that one more time. Half double crochet 2 together. Yarn over your hook, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over your hook, insert your stitch into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. You have 5 loops on your hook, yarn over, draw through all 5. And then you would carry on with the pattern. So you would repeat all of that a total of 4 times or 6 times. Okay, so you're decreasing down the number of stitches you have. As you continue doing that, that allows you to bring everything down just like so. Okay, everybody good so far? I want to make sure I show you how to pick up stitches for the thumb. So I'm going to jump over there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to cut this yellow so I'm not dragging it. And I'm going to, hey, pro tip, if you don't know this, add a pom-pom to your scissors. You won't lose them, y'all. Just saying. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the thumb instructions so that way you guys can see this. Remember I told you we were going to keep that marker there. The instructions tell us they want to join with a slip stitch where that marker is. So I'm going to go ahead, insert my hook where that marker is. Okay. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through the 1. So that's a slip stitch. So I've joined my yarn with a slip stitch where that marker is. Now I carry on. So I'm going to chain 2. So chain 1, chain 2. It says half double crochet in each of the remaining loops of the chain 2 space. So I have another loop right here. So chain 2 doesn't count. So yarn over, I'm sorry, the chain 2 does not count as a half double crochet. So I'm going to do half doubles into each of these 2 loops of the chain 2s. All right, so just like when we joined with that free loop, when we did the cuff, we're going to work these half doubles into those free loops right there of the chains. Okay, now we carry on and you're going to half double crochet into each one of these half double crochets here. Now I'm going to give you a tip. You guys ready? This usually will cause a little tiny hole right here. So what I will do is work a half double crochet 2 together. And I put my hook like literally into the post of this stitch. Can you see that stitch? I'll put my hook through it. Yarn over, pull up. So that's like my first part of my half double crochet 2 together. And then I yarn over and I go into the top of the one I'm supposed to be going into. Yarn over, pull up, and then yarn over, draw through all 5 loops. I want you to see this. See how it closed that hole, but it left me with 1 stitch, so 1 top of the stitch, but it closes the hole. So it makes less need to sew that up later. You don't have to do that. That's not written in the pattern, but it's just one of those things that I will tend to do. And I'll do the same thing on the other side before I join with the slip stitch. Okay, you see that? And then over here, let's see here, this one here, this is where I'm going to pull that one out because it's the last one. And then this is where I would work into the side of this stitch. I just pierce it. Oh, I forgot to yarn over first. Pierce it. Yarn over, pull, oh gosh. I want to make sure I get a good healthy amount of it. And then yarn over and draw through all of them. And then to bring it all home, come up here to the top of the first half double you did and join with a slip stitch just like you did before. Okay, so now as you start working around, you would continue on then just working chain 2 and half double crochets around until your thumb measures 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 inches or however long you need your thumb to be. All right, Then you finish the top of the thumb with those half double crochet 2 togethers just like before, and it finishes the top of the thumb. Everybody with me here? Kind of looks like a pencil, doesn't it? Looks like the eraser and a pencil. Like, I didn't even plan on that. It's kind of interesting. All right, so I want to answer questions. So I'm going to take a minute and answer questions. I do want to remind you, this is recorded. Yes, I went rather quickly, but I wanted to make sure I hit all the points in this time frame, so that way, hopefully you got all of your questions answered. As you rewatch it, you can always get things checked out. Okay, Allie, questions?
Let me see.
All right, I'm going to pull this part out.
This chat has been very active. So if you have a question that we didn't get to, feel free to drop it in the chat right now and we'll try and answer it for you.
Yeah.
Let me see.
I did such a great job. There are no questions.
So I guess if you could just walk through how you would finish the rest of the mitten from here.
So okay. So work the top of the mitten. All right, so I got to rejoin my yarn because
or if you could just talk through how you would finish the rest.
So you would work those rounds of half double crochets. So you'd have one round where you were doing those half double crochets and the half double crochet 2 together. And so you're going to get down to a small number of stitches. And when you get down to that small number of stitches, you'll close them up by like pulling them like a drawstring, and it closes the top of the mitten. Does that help at all? I mean, I can show the half double crochet 2 together again.
I think that helps.
Okay. Because like right here, so you would yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, and draw through all 5. If you're left-handed, it's all the same thing. The convenient thing about this particular pattern is you'll notice that it isn't like, oh, this is what you do for the right side, this is what you do for the left side. It's going to be the same action. It's just for lefties, you're just going to be working in this direction. So as we're working across and our thumb is over here, you're going to be working across and your thumb's going to be over here. But it's going to fit your left hand or your right hand because it's both the same. So you can follow the instructions the exact same way for lefties. That's the great thing. When I tell you guys this is very good for like a recipe for crochet mittens, that's exactly what this is. It reminds me a lot of like my recipe for socks.
And just a reminder that this recording is available at michaels.com/classes, and I'll drop that link in the chat again as well.
All right, what does that say? Can you ask Marley to refer to the written pattern now and show us what part of the pattern is the thumb gusset? Only the body of the mitten and then the top of the mitten. So you know what? Let me do a share screen, and I'll share my the pattern page. All right, hopefully you guys can see the screen here. So right after we finished, why is my, oh, you've got to be kidding me. My mouse just froze on me, which means I can't exit the share screen. You know, of course. Felicia, can you stop the share screen? This is unreal. Totally, as I'm trying to help you all, I cannot believe this. Sorry. I'm sorry, you guys. I wanted to help you, but I couldn't. All right. So if you're looking, thanks, Felicia, by the way. Can you go to my face, hon? Felicia is our helper from Michaels, everybody. So say hi, Felicia, and thank you. Okay, so if you guys are looking at the pattern itself, if you look at page 1, that's where you saw the instructions for the cuff, right? And it was on page 2 where we started to work the body of the pattern. So if we are looking at the first column to the left on page 2, you'll see where it says begin working in rounds. Those first 2 rounds are where we started off working this part of the mitten. And that's the part I said, if you wanted that to be longer, you could do more than 2 rounds. Okay. You don't have to be beholden to 2 rounds.
Then that next part, it says shape thumb gusset. So from that part there where it says shape thumb gusset all the way to where it says all sizes next round, and then it has next round again, and that's in column 2. Those are all the thumb gusset stitches. All right. So that's where you're increasing your stitch count to create that little sort of pocket. It's like a pocket for your thumb. Okay. And just remember, you're always increasing those stitches at those markers. So if you use those markers, it is not written in the pattern, y'all. I don't know why. It makes it so much easier. Use those markers. Just remember, you're increasing at those markers up until you get that thumb the size you need it to be. Here's another thing. If you need your thumb to be larger, maybe you have a man in your life you're making these for with really large hands, like my husband. I always have to add extra stitches around the thumb gusset to make it a little bit more around, you know what I mean? So I usually will do one extra increase. I mean, you can customize that. That's not going to hinder the pattern itself. Once you get those thumb gusset stitches kind of pulled aside and you're back to where you're working in the round for the hand, that's where you're working this portion up until you get to this top portion here. That's the top of the mitten, the top shaping. And that's usually done over a couple rounds, maybe 3 rounds. So if you're just thinking to yourself, you want to customize this a little bit more, go ahead and measure what 3 rounds of your half double crochets, how much does it measure? Is it an inch? Is it a 1/4 of an inch? Is it 3/4 of an inch? Like, figure out what that is. And then take whatever distance you want on your mitten from this portion here to this portion here and subtract that portion for the top. Whatever is right here between this here, that's how long you're going to make your mitten until you start the top. Does that make sense? It's basic math. We have this much. We're going to use this much here for the top of the mitten. That means from here to here, it's going to measure whatever you need it to be. So you can really customize your mittens that way. That's another way if you're just trying to plan out making like exact stripes. You can plan out exactly how many rows or rounds you want to do. Like, there's lots of ways to do that. As far as the top of the mitten, when you finish off those decreases with those half double crochet 2 togethers all the way around, you're going to see your stitches come down rather rapidly. So it comes down to the top. I like to thread my needle, and I will go through, I make a decision. When I thread my needle with the tail, I will go through the top of the stitches, just like those V's at the top of the stitches. I will go through both of them, and like I go through one and then I go through the next one and go through the next. It's like you're weaving them through like this. And when you get it pulled all the way around, I pull it tight like a drawstring, and it pulls those together nice and pretty. And makes a really pretty sort of puckery sort of, I think of it as like, you know, like a pucker of your lips. You just get the little pucker. This is classic television, y'all. You do the pucker, you do the pucker of the lips. And when you get the pucker of the lips, you're like, okay, that's great. I usually will take my tail and go around that pucker one more time and give it a good pull, and then stick my needle down to the center of the mitten and then weave that tail on the inside, and it secures it nice and tight. But that's basically it, y'all. You can take this particular mitten pattern and apply it to many different things. I've done that on other patterns. I recently just had a knit along and a crochet along with Yarn Inspirations called the 3-in-1 hand warmers, where you essentially take this pattern, only I changed it from half double crochets to a split single crochet, and we did color work, and you can make them either fingerless mitts or full mittens or convertible mittens, which leads me to also, if you wanted to turn this particular pattern into a fingerless mitt pattern, y'all, it's so simple. Just from this point, just figure how far you want them before your little fingers are exposed, and just end there. And then maybe you end with a round of crab stitch. You could do some more ribbing. You could do front post, back post ribbing. There's lots of little ways you could tweak it. So you could take this mitten pattern and turn it into fingerless mittens if you wanted. Totally up to you, but hopefully that's helpful. I mean, I hope you guys find that helpful. Again, you can rewatch this video to get all the tips that I've left in the video. I have mitten patterns and video tutorials on the Marley Bird YouTube channel you can check out. And yeah, I know that if you make these mittens, we would love to hear from you. Please use hashtag Yarnspirations or Make It with Michaels. And I would love to see it also. So if you use hashtag Marley Bird, I would love to see it, because you'll hear me. I'll smash your like button. If you do it on Instagram, I'll look for your work. And if you tag me, I'll be like, oh, that's so great. But yeah, that's it. I know I'm talking too much. I'll shut up. I'm sorry, Allie.
Oh, that's okay. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us in a Michael's Community Classroom, and we look forward to seeing you again. Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.